Okay, well, welcome to our latest video interview on the buyer, and very pleased to welcome today Brett Fleming from Armit Wines. So, Brett, how's things with you, Chief?
Good, thank you, and thank you for the time and the opportunity to have a chat. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, nice to see you. I can see you're obviously in the office, or unless you have a very very stage-managed home.
No, you have to forgive the blatant opportunistic moment here to try and put a few good producers and suppliers on the shelf. But yes, I'm in the office in Notting Hill. This is actually our tasting room, not that you can see it, but we will bring in suppliers, and the whole team will then sit here, like a Wesset tasting session, if you like. And they will induct all the team with the new vintages, new products. We do it with every supplier that comes over. It's one of the key aspects of our supply chain that we make sure we train our staff.
So you're in the office. What's the situation now in terms of how you're bringing people back in, or what?
We have a program to bring them back in, but it's certainly not in line with what the government's telling us, because the clarity with which they give us information, I think, is open to debate. We actually have a change of office coming up because our lease came up for renewal where I am now, and we've decided to use this opportunity to move office, and actually we're going to save quite a bit of money as a consequence. That'll be in October, so we will have a phased return back to the office in October. But where if we have, for example, 6 people in one department, we will probably bring 3 of them back and observe social distancing by having them on triangular desks. They'll remain their desk, and they'll be there, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then the other 3 will be working from home Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, they'll swap, and we'll sort of rotate it like that. That's kind of the idea we've got at the moment. But in my opinion, we are, as a business, we are less efficient working from home than we are working collaboratively in an office. By what percentile, I can't tell you, but look, it's so much easier when someone's next to you and you can talk to them about an issue, rather than having to phone them up on Teams or Zoom and ask the question, stop what you're doing. It's not as efficient. I know myself, when I'm working from home, I go downstairs to make a coffee, the geraniums need some water, and you're not as efficient, you're not as focused. So I'm very keen to get the team back together as much as possible.
Okay, and can you say where you're moving to, or is that still?
Yeah, so we're in Notting Hill at the moment, and we're moving just down the road to Hammersmith. We found, because of where Armit is as a business at the moment, it's quite a good opportunity. As I said, we've found a premises that either in 3 or 5 years, they'll either demolish or redecorate. So as a consequence, we've got very, very good terms for that period of time. And it gives me that 3 or 5 year window to really try and improve Armit's position within the market, and allow us then to build the business to then in 3 or 4 or 5 years time decide, right, what do we do now? Do we move somewhere else, bigger premises? It's a fluid working environment in terms of working from home in the office. The last 3 or 4 months have illustrated you can work from home. So it really, we've taken advantage of the challenge with COVID to look at our business from an administrative perspective and see how we make it best work for us. So this opportunity of having to move has actually worked in our favour.
Yeah, so I guess you can introduce all the safe distancing measures as you're fitting out the new office. You can do that from zero, I guess.
Exactly, and so we're with the development firm we're talking to at the moment, we are very much looking to create an office environment that is COVID friendly, if that's the right term, or anti-COVID, or whatever it might be. So the way you come in, the way you exit, as I say, it's giving us that advantage. And we didn't furlough anybody. I'm very proud of that. As a business, we kept all our staff on. And that was principally directed both from our investor and Vivo, but also myself, that I felt it was very important that you probably speak to a lot of people, and they always say our people are more important than anyone else. This was an opportunity for us to actually tangibly show that rhetoric to be real. So we didn't furlough anybody, we kept all our staff on, and that to me was more important than protecting our bottom line. And now it's cost me, of course, but our staff are incredibly important. And we've also made quite a few changes since I joined in terms of many of our staff. I've actually appointed 2 or 3 people during the course of COVID with our strategy moving forward with the right sort of key people in each channel, each department. So as a business, we've weathered the storm pretty well. I won't bore you with the numbers, but we're certainly more profitable than we've ever been. I haven't furloughed staff, and now we've just got to look at whatever the emerging opportunity, particularly in the on-trade, is going to be, to then see how we manage that moving forward.
Okay, so interesting you've been able to do that, because obviously lots of wine importers, distributors, in the country have, because of their mix of business, I suppose, between on and off trade, have, I suppose, some obviously have been forced to furlough their staff. But so what is your balance in terms of on and off trade and private clients?
One of the big advantages we have as a business is I have a high net worth channel. So the private client team that we have are dedicated to servicing the needs of the high net worth community and the ultra high net worth community. I wouldn't say saved us, but has been a major part of our business. Well over a third of our business is driven by the high net worth community.
Okay.
We have Andrew Catt, who heads up the merchant channel, so he looks after our suppliers who are then sold into Berry Brothers, Corney, Just Brooks, and so on and so forth. That's been a very successful business during COVID, because obviously retail has been very much the winner outside of on-trade, and those businesses have really exploited that. And it's something that I think as Armit grows, it's not in my interest to exploit the retail channel specifically as a B2C, because we have the high net worth, and we look to support the merchants in doing so. And that probably represents about another third of our business. And then the rest is made up of regional wholesale, multiple exposure, and on-trade. But it depends how I answer that question, because in turnover, that's 1 percentile, but in profit, it's very different, because obviously we make more profit in the private client channel than we do, say, in multiple retail.
Yeah.
But moving forward, I want all of our channels to grow. I have very aggressive and ambitious plans for all those channels, and certainly multiple retail. We would like to see a significant increase in our exposure in that channel. Not necessarily with all the suppliers I have, because I'm not sure Domaine Leflaive will be delighted to see their wines at Gondola and on Tesco's. But certainly we have, within Vivo, we have opportunity to really raise the flag in a way that Armit hasn't done before, to say, listen, we really can supply you with own label France or Italy in a way that perhaps you hadn't thought Armit would be the right sort of person to talk to. So that's something we really want to challenge. But that'll have an effect on my margin, because of course, off-trade's got lower margins than, say, private clients.
Yeah. So you mentioned the sort of change in the strategy in terms of your staff and the kind of roles that they have. I mean, has that involved then in terms of the staff you brought in during lockdown? What kind of roles have they been?
Yeah, well, I think, you alluded in the introduction that, Armit's been through some changes. It's had a lot of personnel changes. I think I'm the 5th MD within 10 years. I certainly have in my intention to be the only MD for the next 10 years, ideally. My experience and background, I'm not really keen to keep jumping around. But culturally is the big thing I want to really bring into Armit. When you have a business which is fundamentally supplied by the likes of Leflaive, Lafleur, Giacosa, Sassicaia, or Tenuta San Guido, or Nalaya, you don't really sell those wines. You tend to allocate them. You tend to place them. You tend to have a strategy around how you manage their route to market. And I'm not saying any of that's bad. I mean, in some ways it's enviable. We don't. But the flip side is you create a culture of people who tend to allocate and don't sell. That's something that I really want to change within Armit, is we need to represent our suppliers in absolute terms, and not just simply sit here and allocate wines to who we think we can afford to let have our wines. It breeds maybe not arrogance, but it certainly breeds an element of that. And don't forget, I used to be a producer for 30 years. I mean, you've gone into my background, but this is the first time for me to be on the other side of the fence. So I sit here as the MD looking at our suppliers. I'm absolutely in tune with what they are all thinking, what they are all worried about, because that's what I used to think about for 30 years.
Yeah.
And so I think it's certainly something that I'm very keen to drive is that we don't just sell our suppliers, we represent them as the supplier. We don't sell product, we represent people. We represent their story. We are the supplier, if you like.
Yeah, I noticed some of there's that kind of brand manager role that you've introduced.
Yeah, so I mean, this was a change made before I joined, that the buyers were released from Armit. And I have to say, having come in, if that hadn't been the case, I probably would have instigated the same. Because in my opinion, the buyers, that there was a clear line of lack of accountability in the buying duties to the supplier, and then the sale duty of how we manage that forward. Whereas the brand manager encompasses both the buying and sales responsibility as a brand manager. I have ultimate responsibility to our suppliers. So that means I either absolve, get rid of them, bring in new suppliers, but certainly manage the reputation and relationship with Armit and the supplier. But on a day-to-day level, the brand manager is wholly responsible for how we manage the brand, the domain, the estate, whatever term you like, in collaboration with the supplier.
Yeah, and I guess that channel management
that was missing.
I guess with your quite varied channels that you work in, I guess the brand manager is then better positioned to work out which channel that particular wine.
Yeah, so in simple terms, domain X makes 100 gives us 100 bottles of whatever it is. And we have, for the sake of maths, we have 5 channels. So in theory, 20 bottles to each channel. But it doesn't work like that, because firstly, the supplier will have a desire, will have an ambition, will have an expectation of where they want their wines. So they work with the brand manager on how we achieve that. We will also have a margin issue. So I make more margin in one channel than another. So from an MD perspective, I'm keen, obviously, to maximize that privilege of having their supply into my business to make that margin. And third, we have a brand equity, which is, for me, probably the most important part. I'm here today, but tomorrow I might be gone. But the supplier, the brand, is in the market for a long time. And we have a responsibility as Armit to protect, to grow, and to really build that brand equity. So that also has an impact on where we then focus and put the product. Some suppliers love it, that they want their wines with the private clients in the cellars. Others want visibility in Hakkasan or Caprice. So it depends on each of the suppliers. But we, as the intermediary, we have to take that responsibility on collaboratively with them, but never forgetting the equity that we are responsible for protecting and building as their exclusive supplier. I'm only talking about exclusive supply into us, not dual supply or brokering or buying and selling on behalf of the client.
So, I mean, obviously your background, as you mentioned earlier, has come from the producers side with your various roles in Australia and Italy. And I mean, so can you just give us a sort of an insight? Do you think still as a kind of what a producer thinks rather than necessarily what an importer thinks, or do you think that they are very two different ways of looking at the wine supply chain?
I think, if I'm honest, I'm still probably more weighted as a producer than I am as a distributor. Probably not what I want to broadcast to my investors.
It's an interesting view, though, because obviously, that isn't necessarily always the case with distributors, isn't it? To have that.
No, my first duty is to my investor, of course. But since I joined in November, and I'd like to suggest it hasn't been an easy ride. Joining in November, I felt a slightly dysfunctional sales mix. We didn't have the right team. I've addressed that. We had obviously COVID come on board. Armit is well known with its history and its troubles. It's been well documented, so I don't really need to expand on that. But addressing all of that hadn't really been done to the fulfillment. And Vivo had come in and certainly made a huge impact to that with systems and particularly the financial side of our business. So when I joined, my attention wasn't really needed on the finance and ops side. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly isn't perfect. But Vivo had done a huge amount of work on that. What I needed to really focus on was the marketing and the sales side, which is what I've done. And I'm very pleased to say that we've now delivered a very healthy return back to in vivo for the first time in many years. And I'm not just talking a few pounds, we're talking a significant turnaround. The challenge is that my financial year used to be the end of June, but in vivo themselves have moved their financial year to the end of September. And as a consequence, I've now had to move my financial year to the end of September. Otherwise, I would have been able to report probably comfortably over £1 million swing of EBITDA in my financial accounts, which I think is remarkable in this climate. That won't be the case now because of my worst 3 months of my calendar, July, August and September. It's just coincidental. We still return a profit, which we haven't done for a while, but it won't be quite as much as I would have liked. Flip side being, of course, my next financial year starting 1st October, I'm very bullish. I think we'll have a very, very successful year, albeit who knows what COVID will do, what the next lockdown will be like. You can't account for these things, but I'm confident with the new staff, with the suppliers that we've retained, because a lot of work's gone into looking at our portfolio. We had far too many wines. Painful decisions had to be made, but the problem Armit had is they didn't really have MDs here to make the decision. So I've made those decisions. We're stuck by them. Some unpleasant conversations, of course, but it's just part of doing business.
And do you think because of your producer background, do you think because of your producer background, making those decisions was perhaps a little bit not easier, but a little bit more, you were able to sort of take those decisions because you could identify quite quickly which producer you could see as having longevity in the business?
Yes, and I think the other thing is we have a responsibility to our other suppliers that we want to keep to make sure we remain focused on who they are, rather than fill ourselves up or at least maintain the supply that we had and kind of do an okay job for everybody. As a producer, I much preferred it when a distributor around the world told me either we want to embrace you or we don't want you. The middle ground was very, very difficult to manage for both parties. So having that in my head has certainly given me a lot of clarity in just quite what do we need in terms of our suppliers to then go out and deliver the growth that I want for the business. One of those areas is, apart from Tuscany and Piemonte, or Piedmont rather, we really only want one, maximum two producers from any one of the regions that we represent. Because we therefore can give the total and full focus of our resources to that supplier, because that's the region that they come from, that they champion. And Armit's DNA has always been icon producers. If you're going to represent somebody from a particular region, represent the best. And that's something I wish to carry on champion. It's something I certainly wish to really drive. So, we had one American supplier, Diamond Creek. No, it's not Screaming Eagle, but it's certainly up there and one of the great producers. We didn't have 20 of them. Unfortunately, of course, they've now been purchased. Well, depends which side of the fence you fit on, but they've been purchased by Louis Roederer, so they'll be moving to Maison Marquis Domaine. But we will carry on representing them for this year for the private client channel exclusively. But that means there's an opportunity for us to now go and find out somebody, to plug that hole. But it has to be iconic. I'm not just going to represent any old winery. They need to have reason to come to this market, particularly given the challenges within the market.
Yeah. Do you think that, you mentioned, that obviously Armits had its ups and downs in the last few years. But the flip side of that, I suppose, a business of the scale and prestige of In Vivo has chosen to come in and actually invest in Armit. It didn't come in and choose to sell it on or move it on. It's actually chosen to invest in it. And it's obviously also chosen yourself to be the person to lead it here. So it's part of your message over the last 6 months been one of reassurance to some of your icon producers about where Armit is going.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the reality is the first 3 months I spent with my cap in hand going around to our suppliers and trying to convince them to stay. The noise of Armit had got to such a point where a lot of confidence had gone. And as you know, we've lost suppliers. For me, it's a really great shame that I got here 6 months, I got here appointed and wasn't 6 months earlier. I'd love to have had a chat with Gaia. I mean, that was a loss that we shouldn't have happened. But it did happen because, frankly, Armit didn't give and deliver the service or the attention that was required. Now, what I would say, much of that is even 2.5, 3 years ago. And in Vivo's presence and support, as you've mentioned, was about 18 months ago. And the reputation that I have and I as Armit have in the marketplace is one thing, but I can assure you where we are today is completely different to where that reputation is. And that means I'm in a lot of people's blind spot.
Yeah.
It's made an advantage. We didn't furlough anybody because we could afford not to. We are now profitable, we're focused, we've gone through our pain, we've gone through our restructure, if you like, we've gone through our challenges, we've come out the other side. Yeah, there's been a price to pay and there's been some costs involved, people, suppliers, staff, customers, but that was 18 months ago. Now we're lean, focused, and we're starting to get some very, very interesting wins. And it's very sad to see what's going on in the marketplace because of COVID with some of our competitors. But we have weathered this storm very, very well, and now we intend to capitalize on it. That for me is very exciting for our suppliers, for our staff, and indeed for our customers.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think at the beginning of the conversation about a lot of that work that Vivo did initially was around the systems and the kind of the infrastructure, which I suppose has built the foundation for you to then put your strategy on top.
Yes, well, a good example of that is the way we used to buy. There was virtually no plan on whatever it was that we bought. How do we sell it? It was just we had to satisfy our suppliers because our relationship with them was about the only tangible way that we could do that. That's no longer the case. Every purchase order has to be signed off by myself or the financial director, period. The brand managers put together a plan that allows us to forecast for the next 12 months what we think we need. And that's fed into the system. Now, of course, that 12-month isn't fixed. We look at it daily, weekly, monthly, but we're working in collaboration with the suppliers so that they know what to expect. They know when times are good, when times are tough. And we have a collaborative approach with them so that the relationships that we're rebuilding have very much meant that they have input into what it is that this market and Armit can deliver. Of course, that's a much healthier environment to then build mid to long-term plans. At the moment, we're about roughly 21 million pound business. I want to get to 30 yesterday. And I believe we can do that organically with what we currently have in our supply, realistically within 3 years, but I'd like to think we can do that sooner. But ultimately, I'd like to get to about 50 million. But I don't really want to be much bigger than that. I think at 50 million, we'll be a very healthy, a very targeted icon supplier into the UK market for all channels, and not just keep filling ourselves up with suppliers, because I think that's where we've gone wrong in the past. And therefore, we've not been able to service those suppliers and build the relationships for every single one in the way that I want to make sure we protect. And that's coming from the producer that I used to be.
Yeah. And if it's not necessarily building producers, is it very much around the skill sets you have and the people?
Well, I used to be a winemaker, so I have empathy with.
Is that the way you see?
I hasten to add, I wasn't a very good winemaker, which is why I'm no longer one. But I was competent, but I had a good palate, and I've always pretty much been involved on more the premium, the more farmer side, the more domain side. Even when I was with BRL Hardy, I was very much involved on the Chateau Nala, the Leasingham, the Horton, and worked with people like Larry Cherubino, Stephen Pannell, Kerry Thompson. And these are names which would be well known to you. And then when I went to Rathbone, it was Yering Station and Mount Lange-Giran with people like Tom Carson and Dan Buckle. So all my career, even if it was New World, was very much on the premium side. But my love has always been Italy. I've always had I don't know why, I can't explain to you, but I've always had a love affair with Italy, not just wine, food, as you can probably tell. The great wines of Tuscany and Piedmont are my favorite, but also places like Campania with the Fiano. And that's really when I got lucky, and I was appointed by Classica and spent a lot of time in Italy and took over really the distribution and sales program globally for Classica, and that business itself, the most famous name being Avignonesi, but they actually had 15 different wineries which we had exclusivity for on the global markets. And really that's where my deep love of Italy I wouldn't say became satisfied, but I was very privileged to be able to work and spend a lot of time in Tuscany working with Italian producers. And you know, when you go and meet people like Biancanello and Brunello, and you got to wipe the dirt off his hands when you go and shake hands, which you can't have to do that now, but they're the people that I wanted to work with. They're the people that I wanted to represent as a producer. You go into their cellars. When Armits sell a bottle of wine, the profit that's made either to the supplier or for myself, it's not about improving the CEO's share position or improving our share. It's making a difference to that grower. And that will never leave me. That is something which is incredibly important and something I really want to champion all the way through the supply chain, in our sales rhetoric, in our marketing, in the conversations we had with buyers, because that's who we are as Armit. We represent not only icons, but we represent people. We represent a product that is made with their love, their challenges, their disappointments, the Italian bureaucracy that's behind how things are made. You know, we represent all of that as their distributor, and that's something I'm very proud of that we achieve here in Armit.
Yeah, well, that's very nicely put. I mean, and it was that part of the appeal for you to move to the importer side.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Part of the appeal was I got sick of living in an aircraft and living in departure lounges. I was well paid. I did a lot of consultancy work as well after I left Classica. And I'm lucky enough to call people like Giuseppe Vara a very close friend. And that's just because of the deep love that I have for not only Italy, but the way that they think as a family. So yes, when the Armit opportunity presented itself, I saw, because of their suppliers, not just from Italy, but La Rioja in Spain. And this isn't me using this opportunity now to spiel off names. I mean, these people are deeply connected to their land. And I just felt that there was a disconnect with what Armit's supply chain was like, their suppliers, and the way it was being, if you like, presented into the market. And I saw that for me as the challenge and therefore opportunity. So yes, it appealed to me deeply to try to bring that level of, that culture, if you like, that culture change. To get away from the arrogance, which is probably the best word to use, the arrogance of we're Armit and because we have these suppliers, we can do what we like, which I'm not saying was the case per se, but really change that to be, hang on guys, we actually have a responsibility to these people. We need to be connected to their DNA so that we portray it all the way through. And again, that's because I'm a producer at heart. And all my best distributors around the world were the people that were me rather than representing me. And that's what I want Armit to become to our suppliers. And that's where I see the opportunity in the trade as well. Otherwise, we're just another Chianti producer, another Barolo producer, another Spanish producer. And what's the difference in that?
I get a sense talking to you that you obviously, it's a person's personality and a person's ethics and values is clearly very important to you. I mean, so in terms of the team you want to build at Armit and the team that you have and the kind of the Armit person that you'd like to be able to work with?
Yeah, it's a tricky question to answer because people are individuals and everyone has a sort of different way of operating. But certainly you can use, and it may be a cliche, but you can use words like respect. Respect for the product that we have, not just in our responsibility to the supplier, but respect of how we sell it, who we sell it to. Le Flave, very good example. I mean, we've unfortunately just had an incident where some Armit wine boxes have appeared in Hong Kong. And understandably, Barista Domaine Le Flave is a bit grumpy at me because we should only be selling it in the UK. I completely agree. And we need to show our suppliers where we add value to them being in the portfolio. So that comes from respect. Respecting on who we sell these wines to, where we sell them, and the price that we sell them for. Because all my life, I've believed in raising the prices, not discounting them. One of the biggest shocks I got coming back to the UK was how over the last 20 years, probably, I've seen value eroded in the entire category of the UK in a way that has shocked me. We've trained our consumer to not buy it unless it's on special, to not buy it unless it's a bog off. And that's disgraceful. It's utterly disgraceful from my perspective, and the responsibility we have to our suppliers. We need to be pushing the prices up, because these aren't heart monitors. These aren't absolutely necessary things in our lives. These are things that really should bring us great pleasure. And that means you have to earn it. You have to earn that pleasure to express it, if you like. There's only so many bottles made of some of these wines, but we need to respect how they're sold. And of course, we then get to the fine line of respect turning into arrogance. And that's where I think we need to be very careful. But by brand equity, understanding and working with our suppliers, and really showing where that added value can come from by the way we operate. Best example of that would be the relationship that I've just started to develop as Armit with the quartermaster sommeliers. I see that as a key area where the rhetoric of what I've just been talking about can actually be tangibly shown, and that we're investing in the long term. These are boys and girls, young men and young women who are tomorrow's leaders. I met Ronan Sabin on a trip, I hate to admit, maybe 25, 30 years ago, into Australia, when he was a young lad and I was a nobody. He's changed, maybe I haven't. But look at what he does today. Look at the initiatives he's now doing with quartermaster sommeliers and with 67. So our investment in this channel is more about the long term, but also it means all of our suppliers, all of their wines will be used during the courses. They won't be used in the exams, but all of their wines, all of these icon producers will be used during the course of their training, which will install in them an understanding of those suppliers. It doesn't benefit me, it benefits the supplier. Okay. This is a tangible way of how we add benefit to people who are in Armit's portfolio.
And that partnership is, that's alive now, is it? And how long is that still working for?
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm not quite sure if they've ordered any wine or where the courses are, but it's a one-year deal, but I see this very much a minimum 5-year agreement. I don't want to go in there and exploit the relationships for a year. Thanks very much. This is a long-term commitment. So long as I'm in this chair, it's something that we'll be committed to, ideally in the long term. Yeah. And of course, it means that my team at Armit will now build relationships with them, with the students, and as they progress, clearly we'll have a knock on the doors of whatever outlet they're at, and there'll be a connection. Yes, there's a commercial reality attached to it, but it's done in a nice way. It's done in a way where we're really showcasing the great producers we have in an environment which really helps them learn, and we're not shoving it down their throats. It's just being the best wine. It's up to them to decide that, you know.
And the wine world works by connections, doesn't it? It works by the right people knowing each other and putting the right people together. And
yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier about I'm a guy who's clearly got values, and I have, which has made some of the decisions with our suppliers that I've had to have discussions with very painful. Right. And I don't believe I'm any good at it. I think some of those discussions I've had have been awkward, but equally, it's also about respect. And you know, the long-term future of Armit will be built through quartermaster sommelier type initiatives, utilizing the suppliers that I want to really build a long-term plan with, not exploiting icon producers for a short term and then turning my back on them. We can't afford to do that. So make those decisions now and move forward.
But also, you're potentially helping that producer by sometimes splitting. If you don't feel that you're the right importer for them, they're going to be better off working with somebody else who might be better fit. So I guess although it's painful to do, it's also perhaps beneficial for them in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of being an MD of a business like this, to make these decisions, and no supplier is ever happy with it. They clearly hang up afterwards going, well, I'm a whatever, and I understand that, but that's just part of the nature of having to make these calls. But I always try and say, you know, that's the decision today. Who knows how the market's going to develop? I don't want to burn any bridges. As we grow the business, as we develop, I'm very open to looking at other opportunities. But you know, Armit's DNA, what is it? It's fundamentally Icon Italy, Icon France. If you look at the great producers we have, Leflaive, Lafleur, two good examples, Champagne, Jumenet and Gifoy. But fundamentally France and Italy, and absolutely La Rioja Alta from Spain. Great producer, Icon, We don't want to become a Spanish supplier, but we want to champion who La Rioja are with an Armit. So therefore, is it right that we bring in half a dozen Chileans or half a dozen Argentinians or focus on Australia? Not really. It's not our core strength. I go back to what I said before. Our DNA is very much about icon producers. And you could accuse us, therefore, of cherry picking. Yes, that's possibly true. But we are an icon supplier. We don't have a portfolio filled with thousands of different producers from all over the world. We are focused and very clear on who we want to champion. And that's the business model that I wish to.
So you mentioned earlier about wanting to do more business with the supermarkets. So kind of how do you marry the kind of the icon producer and sort of premium price positioning with, I mean,
this kind of goes slightly back to the comment I made before about how horrified I was about how the value out of the market has just been completely. And most conversations, I'm fine one to talk, having come out of BRL Hardy and at the left Constellation. So perhaps I'm being hypocritical here, but nonetheless, we have to find ways to bring value back into the category. And I know even on your forum, or you've been involved in forums, where some of the key major distributors, our competitors, have had open conversations about this as well, and how from an on-trade perspective, we really need to raise the price points. I completely agree, but that's not exclusive to the on-trade. We have to do the same to the off-trade as well. And it's not easy, and most buyers in off-trade, certainly they moved around a lot, so you build a relationship up with them, and then 2 years later they're selling cabbages or whatever it might be. So it is a challenge. But I've hired a chap called Fraser Curry for that very purpose. And Fraser is a professional, highly trained, very much from the accolade type of this world, but also gets the need to raise the bar. Yeah. Now, we're not going to be selling 904 from La Rioja or La Flave Polini or Bruna Giacosa's Barolos. Of course not. But we certainly can supply own label Chianti Classico. Why not? Why can't Coachabella be responsible for supplying some of the best Chianti Classico Sangiovese that maybe a multiple retailer wishes to list? Yes, it'll be at the top end, but I'm determined to attack it. We have to start somewhere. What I'm not going to do is sit here and say, oh, we can't do it because the UK multiple buyer refuses to have that price point. It's on us to convince the trade, in this case, the supermarket, that it's in their interest to. Their cash margin will be better. They're offering something to their consumer, which is better. I'm not going to name any names, but when you go into some of the supermarkets and you see their offering, there's not a lot that I want to buy as a fine wine consumer. And I've had conversations with our high net worth channel. Many of these people go in to shop at some of these major multiple outlets. They don't buy wine. Why not? Because they buy their wine elsewhere. Yeah. Through specialists like Majestic or Latham's or Virgin Wines or us or Corny and Barrow. They're not buying wine in the supermarkets. Well, that's a missed opportunity. So it's up to us to convince the supermarket buyer that actually they're missing out on an opportunity here. Yeah. It's not going to happen like that. It's going to take us time.
Yeah. And I guess over the last 4 months or so, we've seen from Kantar and Nielsen all the data that's come back from the off trade that actually price points have been pretty strong in the supermarket, and the big brands have been able to keep their price position, and the lockdown is potentially there's been obviously less discounting going on. So I mean, whether that will continue long term remains to be seen. But I suppose at least that has given someone like yourself the opportunity to talk about
Well, the other thing too is we're not on their radar. Yeah. What on earth would someone at Tesco is thinking of picking up the phone to speak to Armit for a Chablis or for a Pinot Grigio? They just wouldn't think of Armit. They've not been in there. So I wish to challenge that, absolutely. But it's an ongoing process, and we're just talking about one channel. There's also all of the regional opportunities that we have, where independent bottle shop owners and 4 or 5 outlets owned by one business, where we also want to really start engaging. But I'd also add that within Vivo behind us, we have access to an enormous supply of opportunity for the UK market, which actually do feed into all of the price points which are currently being serviced.
Yeah.
The question, therefore, is we could tomorrow turn the switch on and turn Armit into a major supplier into the multiple retail. It's not going to happen. We're going to manage this very carefully, because I'm not sure many of my suppliers will be delighted to see themselves distributed by a mass retailer distribution model.
Yeah, but the private label side of things allows them, gives them an extra channel, yes, and cash flow, and
yes, it does.
All,
yes, it does.
All the value that it brings.
Yes, it does, and it's something which we've invested a lot of time in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Particularly with Fraser's appointment. But his appointment isn't the only one I've made. I wish I could, but in this forum today, I need another couple of weeks. But I have another appointment which I have made, which will come around about October, and the sales channel, and that will make a material difference as well to one of my other channels. But we've also sadly had to go through and look at all of our staff and really ask the question, is this the right business for you moving forward? Okay. It's very well doing it for our suppliers. It's very well, our customers doing it to us. We also need to do it to our staff and find sure that we've got the right team in place to really take the business forward. So that's all happened now. That's done. It's water under the bridge. Again, tough decisions, but they had to be made, which is why Armit now is really very well poised to take advantage of any of the opportunities that present themselves in the marketplace.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody who potentially might be coming for an interview with you, arguably watch this interview and can get a sense of the kind of person that you're looking for. So without having to spell it out, I think you're clearly very, as I mentioned earlier, your passion and your drive comes through. I mean, just to sort of finish off, I mean, how as a business leader, I mean, I've asked this question to other people at this time, but you obviously only joined this company in November, and it's it's only July, but it seems like it must seem like a year and a half, I suppose, for you. But as a business leader through all this period, and how have you found it? And
I won't lie, I found it very challenging. I'm not sure I'm a business leader. I mean, there are people in the industry who I admire enormously. Michael Saunders would probably be one of them. My old CEO, Christopher Carson, taught me a lot. Okay, we're going back a few years, but I would never dream of putting myself on the same level of them. I've got a long way to go before I can even consider that. But certainly, I have a responsibility which I take very deeply, and that's to my staff first, my customers, and my investor as well. And I do take that very seriously, and that's what drives me. I think we've got some major challenges ahead of us. I think nobody's really talked about Brexit in the last 6 months, and that has gone away, and that for me is a real problem. My Burgundy campaign, my En Premier Burgundy campaign, Armit had a wonderful reputation for Burgundy, and over the last 10 years, for various reasons, it's been eroded. So Nicholas Clerk, who works for us here, who's a master sommelier, very much charged him, I want it back. I want my Burgundy reputation back. We have done that. But Brexit's going to be a real problem, because practically we drive a van down to Burgundy, we load it up with all the samples for the En Premier tastings in London, and we drive that van back. How are we going to do that with Brexit? How are we going to get that stock through? It's just got a nightmare written all over it. So what Miles is doing at the Trade Association is legendary, and I just hope the government wake up, because I'm not sure who it was, but one of the government advisors said that the VI1 form has little to no impact. They have no idea what they're doing. And so as a business leader, to answer your question, how do we navigate that? I'm not sure I know.
Yeah. But I think having someone like you in our industry, though, is going to be a great asset, because, as you say, you're bringing your experience from all over the world, and you're bringing a producer's perspective as well, which I think perhaps,
well, a good example of that is New York. I mean, one of my favorite cities, one of my favorite markets. In the UK, we pay our sales team big fat salaries, anywhere between 35 to 75,000 pounds, depending where you are in that sales. And if you don't get your budget, you're still going to get your monthly packet. In New York, you don't get a salary, it's commission only. And as a consequence, the good people come to the top. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating 100% commission, but what happens is it feeds a premium industry. So when you go out for dinner or lunch in New York, you're going to be paying $200 a head for lunch or dinner, because that's what it costs. And that's the industry. So all the by the glass stuff is all expensive wine. the salesperson who wakes up in the morning isn't going to focus selling something which is cheap because the commission on it's not enough. Same effort to sell that expensive bottle is the same effort to sell the cheap bottle. So let's sell the expensive one to get the commission. So it's this whole culture in New York, and DC is a bit similar. We don't have that in the UK. And
I think the key word you mentioned is professional. I think that's a real you know, I mean, with all due respect to you know, that word professional is not a word that often is used by people in the wine trade. I mean, it's people are doing profession, yes, but it's how the professional side of it is actually.
Well, I go back to that word again about respect and responsibility. Our professionalism as a business will come through if we respect our suppliers and are professional in our duties and how we execute their expectations into the UK market. And fundamentally, that's what I'm trying to bring into Armit. That's what I believe over the last 8 months that we've really shaped. And absolutely, that's the way forward for Armit Wines.
Brilliant. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Thank you very much indeed.
No,
very nice talking to you. And I mean, I really appreciate your frankness and openness, and you know, great to have a chat. And wish you all the best in the next 6 months.
Well, come along to our next tasting when COVID's over, and we'll have a glass of something decent.
Absolutely, sir. Okay. All right. Well, nice to talk to you.
You too.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye.